there is one scene in Red Dragon that turns it from a pretty good film to an incredible film. And I will discuss which particular scene that is towards the end. I don't want to spoil anything for the most part. Red Dragon, released in 2002 and directed by Brett Ratner, is the prequel to Silence of the Lambs. I love Silence of the Lambs. It's one of the first psychological horror thrillers that I fell in love with, and I love Anthony Hopkins. I was nervous when I first watched this film because, I'd seen Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal, but I wasn't sure how I'd deal with a prequel. Because prequels, as I'm sure you are aware, are often hit or miss. They're either really great or really pointless and unnecessary. Red Dragon is really, really great. Obviously, this is based on Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. I haven't read it. If you know how it compares or what it's like, feel free to let me know. If you think it's worth reading, let me know as well. I expect it probably is. Music here, just before I forget, is by Danny Elfman, my favourite composer of all time, of course. Absolutely love him. Just a little bit more icing on the cake. Of course, the cherry on top of that is Anthony Hopkins, who reprises his role as Dr. Hannibal Lecter. And I will look at the cast in a moment because the cast is just ridiculous. It's a phenomenal cast. But just briefly, I will read out the description from IMDb to kind of give you a little look at what this is about, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about the narrative or its intricacies, because I don't want to really spoil anything at all. So this says, a retired FBI agent with psychological gifts is assigned to help track down, quote-unquote, the Tooth Fairy, a mysterious serial killer. Aiding him is an imprisoned forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Hannibal, quote-unquote, the cannibal, Lecter. Brilliant. There's nothing about this on its own that is different to most psychological thrillers. We have the FBI agent, retired FBI agent, who is trying to track down a serial killer. Obviously there are a lot of clues, lots of things left in his wake, bits of information for us to piece together as a viewer, while the FBI agent is also doing the same thing on screen. What makes this, I was going to say a cut above the rest, I'll say a cut above most, is of course the inclusion of Hannibal. And Hannibal as a character is just, whenever he's on screen, he just steals the light, even if he's not the one talking, even if he's not the main focus. He just completely steals the limelight. Hopkins is a complete scene stealer. He's just incredible in this role. And because this is a prequel to Silence of the Lambs, I feel like we know more about him than we otherwise would have done had this been released first. And I think it's a very interesting character study about where he was and how he ended up being, obviously, where we know he ended up. I'm trying to not say too much in case you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs either. But I will say, watch the films in their order of release. So watch, Silence of the Lambs first and Hannibal and then this one. I don't think it would spoil too much if you watch them in order of time period. But at the same time, I think just watch them in order of release. It's always the best way. So the development of the narrative is great. I personally did not think it was predictable. There are a lot of really interesting things that pop up. The actual, the things, the clues, the information, the goose chase is not that predictable. And that, while the format is very similar to a lot of similar films, the actual journey is quite unique and quite a bit different, and that's something that I really, really enjoyed. In addition to Hannibal, we have, great supporting characters, and Edward Norton plays Will Graham, our retired FBI agent, and I'm trying to remember if this was the first or the second Norton film that I saw. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I imagine, just based on when I would have seen this, it probably would have been the second. But that's just me whittling on about nothing. Brilliant character, well developed enough to be engaging, not as interesting as Hannibal, but still really likeable. Ralph Fiennes is in this, Emily Watson, who I love, Philip Seymour Hoffman. A really great supporting cast as well. I have no issues there whatsoever with Danny Elfman doing the music. It's just ridiculously atmospheric. From start to finish, couldn't take my eyes off of it. That's my overview of my opinions. But I do now want to mention that one scene that I just absolutely adored. And this is the scene, I don't know why I find this so funny, because it's absolutely horrific. But it's the scene with the, goodness, it's the scene with the wheelchair on fire. If you're still listening to me and you haven't seen this and you don't mind the spoiler, you can actually, if you go into Google and just search that, there are clips on YouTube, there are GIFs with it. It's a very, very popular scene, and then I can't even, I don't know why it's so funny, because it's obviously horrific. I think it was just so unexpected that they were going to do something so shocking, because it really is so powerful, and I think that's why it's so popular, is because they just went, right, let's make this as shocking as we can. And visually it's amazing. I would assume, I don't know exactly how they did this, but I would assume that they set a dummy or a mannequin on fire in the chair. But if anybody knows any different, feel free to explain it. But it's just a really, really powerful moment. And it's moving and it's emotional and it's shocking. But it's my favorite moment in this film, and one of my favorite film moments of all time. I just absolutely love it. Red Dragon's absolutely worth watching. As I said, ideally I would recommend watching Silence of the Lambs first, as I think you'll just get more out of it that way. But I don't think it's essential. I think this film is better than Hannibal, but not as good as Silence of the Lambs, I think. I mean, no, it's definitely not as good as Silence of the Lambs, but in terms of trying to kind of work out where it fits in terms of being better or worse than Hannibal, no, I'm pretty happy with putting the first film first, the third film second, and the second film third. Really good film. Definitely check it out.